The night Alpha King Armani rejected his pregnant mate, the moon turned the color of old bone, and every star above Ironridge Kingdom seemed to hold its breath. Lorena Finch stood in the ceremonial circle at the heart of the great hall, her hands bound in silver cord. The white dress they had forced her to wear clung to her frame, deliberately chosen by Lady Briella Conway to emphasize the small swell of her belly. Around her, hundreds of wolves watched in silence, their amber eyes glowing in the firelight, their breath misting in the cold air that poured through the open stone arches despite the roaring hearths. This was not supposed to be her story. 3 months ago, she had been Luna of Ironridge, beloved by her mate, respected by the kingdom. She had walked these same halls with her head high and her hand in Armani's, believing that love could overcome the whispers about her bloodline, the rumors about her family's past. She had been wrong. Armani stood on the raised dais above her now, his broad shoulders rigid beneath the black ceremonial cloak, his jaw carved from stone. The crown of iron sat heavy on his head, catching the torchlight like dark fire. He had once traced the curve of her face with trembling fingers, and told her she was the only place his wolf felt peace. He had once pulled her close during thunderstorms, and whispered that her heartbeat was the only rhythm that calmed the violence inside him. But now he wouldn't look at her. Elder Harris Mills stood beside the king, his weathered hands shaking as he held a crystal vial over the sacred flame. The fire burned white and pure, as it had for centuries during mate bond ceremonies. Harris's face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, and when he spoke, his voice cracked like breaking ice. "By the ancient rites," Harris said, each word seeming to cost him, "we test the truth of blood and bond." He poured the contents of the vial into the flame. Armani's blood hit the fire, and the white light died. In its place, darkness bloomed like ink in water. The flame turned black, writhing and twisting as if in pain, and a collective gasp rippled through the hall like wind through tall grass. Lorena's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where 2 small heartbeats fluttered against her palm, unaware that their world was collapsing before they had even taken their first breath. She felt them stir inside her, felt their tiny movements, and her wolf howled in anguish. Harris lifted his gaze to the assembled court, and tears streaked down his weathered face. "The child does not carry the king's essence," he announced, his voice breaking on the final word, as if the lie itself were choking him. To Armani's left stood Briella Conway in a gown of deep crimson, the color of fresh blood against snow. Her golden hair was braided like a crown, her pale hands folded with perfect composure. She looked like sympathy itself, blue eyes soft with false concern, lips pressed into a delicate frown that suggested she took no pleasure in this necessary cruelty. But Lorena saw the truth in the way Briella's fingers tightened ever so slightly, in the way her pulse jumped at her throat, in the barely contained satisfaction that flickered behind those sympathetic eyes. Briella Conway had been raised for this moment. She was the perfect Luna from an ancient noble house, beautiful and ruthless in equal measure. She had studied every law of succession, every weakness in council alliances, every preference of the king's household. She knew when to lower her eyes, and when to let men think a thought had been theirs before she spoke it aloud. Behind her, half hidden in shadow near the stone pillars, Lord Gregory Conway watched with the satisfied stillness of a spider in its web. His family had spent 3 generations positioning themselves beside the throne, whispering counsel, collecting debts, burying truths beneath layers of carefully constructed lies. And now, finally, the last obstacle stood alone in silver chains. Lorena searched Armani's face desperately, looking for the man who had loved her. She found only hollow spaces where warmth had been. His golden eyes were distant, clouded, as if he were looking at her through deep water. Something vital had gone out behind them, something she had relied on without ever realizing how much she needed it. His wolf should have been howling. The mate bond should have been screaming. But there was only cold, creeping doubt that had seeped into him like a poison over months, so gradual he had not noticed until it consumed everything they had built together. Lorena Finch, Armani said. The formal use of her full name, spoken in that flat, dead tone, felt like a fist around her heart. Not Lorena. Not my Luna. Not the name spoken with tenderness in the dark when the world fell away and they were just two souls wrapped around each other. Lorena Finch. A stranger's name, a criminal's name. You are hereby stripped of your bond to this throne, Armani continued, and his voice carried across the hall with terrible finality. You will leave Ironridge before dawn. You will not return. The child you carry is not of royal blood, and therefore has no claim to this kingdom or its protection. Lorena's throat closed. The silver cords bit into her wrists as she clenched her fists, feeling the sting but welcoming it, because physical pain was easier than the agony tearing through her chest. She forced the words out anyway, quiet but clear, spoken only to him, though the entire court could hear. This child is yours, Armani. His jaw tightened. For one flickering moment, pain crossed his face. Real, raw, unbearable. She saw it crack through his mask, saw the man she loved struggling beneath the weight of whatever had been done to him. His hand moved slightly, as if to reach for her, and hope flared in her chest like a desperate flame. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold mask of a king who had been taught that doubt was wisdom and mercy was weakness. Then let the wilderness raise it. The words fell like stones into deep water. Silence swallowed the hall. No one moved, no one breathed. Even the torches seemed to still, their flames frozen in shock at what had just been spoken. Lorena felt something inside her crack, not her heart, that had already broken when he first looked at her with suspicion 3 weeks ago, when he first pulled away from her touch as if burned, when he first chose to believe whispered accusations over the bond they shared. No, what cracked now was the fragile hope she had been clinging to with bloody fingers. The belief that love could survive lies if it was strong enough. The naive faith that the man who had promised to protect her would never become the man who destroyed her. She realized now, standing in front of wolves who had once bowed to her, watching the man she loved condemn her and their children to death with 6 words, that she had been a fool. Love could be poisoned, bonds could be clouded, trust could be murdered slowly, carefully, until the victim did not even realize they were dying, and the man she had trusted with her soul, with her future, with the lives growing inside her, had just sentenced them all to death. Lorena did not beg. The Finch family had been destroyed once before, torn apart and scattered like ashes on the wind, their name turned into a curse that mothers use to frighten children. She had learned long ago, as the last surviving daughter of that ruined bloodline, that begging only fed the cruelty of those who enjoyed watching you kneel. Dignity was the only thing they could not take unless she gave it to them. Instead, Lorena lifted her chin. She looked at Armani one last time, not with hatred, but with the terrible clarity of someone who had just learned that the person they loved most could become a stranger in a single breath. She memorized his face, the strong line of his jaw, the scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fight, the slight curve of his lips that she had traced with her fingers 1,000 times. She memorized it so she would never forget what trust looked like before it died. Then she turned and walked through the parted crowd. Her bound hands were steady. Her steps were silent. Her heart was already building walls around itself, walls so thick and high that no one would ever breach them again. Past wolves who had once called her Luna, past women who had asked her advice on herbs and healing, past men who had sworn loyalty to her and now looked away as if mercy were a disease they might catch. Behind her, the great iron doors of Ironridge Keep groaned shut with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Before her, the winter forest opened its arms, dark and endless and waiting, and high above, hidden behind clouds that had gathered like mourners at a funeral, the moon bled silver light across the snow. The light fell in shafts between the trees, illuminating the path that would lead Lorena away from everything she had known, away from warmth and safety, away from the man who had been her entire world. The moon wept for what had been lost, and in the shadows of that weeping light, Lorena Finch walked into exile, carrying the future of a kingdom that had just condemned her to die. The cold hit Lorena the moment she stepped beyond the protective wards of Ironridge Keep. It was not the gentle chill of winter evenings when she and Armani would walk through the Luna Garden wrapped in furs. This was a living thing with teeth clawing at her exposed skin, seeping through the thin white dress until she felt it settling into her bones. A guard waited at the outer gate, his face carefully blank. He held out a bundle, a travel cloak that was too thin to provide real warmth, a water skin that was only half full, and a small pouch that clinked with a handful of coins. Exile provisions, calculated to look like mercy from a distance while offering no real chance of survival. Lorena took them without speaking. There was nothing to say. The guard would not meet her eyes, and she understood why. Pity was dangerous in Ironridge these days. Show too much sympathy for the disgraced Luna, and you might find yourself questioned about your own loyalty. She fastened the cloak around her shoulders with numb fingers and walked through the gate. Behind her, iron screeched against stone as the gate closed. The sound echoed across the frozen ground, final and absolute. She did not look back. There was nothing behind her now but ghosts and lies. The forest path stretched ahead, disappearing into darkness between towering pines. Snow had fallen earlier, covering the ground in a white blanket that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Now it just looked cold and vast, and utterly indifferent to whether she lived or died. Lorena pulled the inadequate cloak tighter and started walking. She had no destination. The kingdom's borders were 2 days' journey in any direction for a healthy wolf traveling at speed. For a pregnant woman on foot in winter, it might take 5 days. If she survived that long. Her hand drifted to her belly, feeling the small swell beneath the fabric. The pups were still now, perhaps sensing her fear, perhaps simply resting. She sent them what comfort she could through the bond that connected mother to unborn children, a bond that had nothing to do with kings or kingdoms or the lies that had destroyed her life. "I will keep you safe," she whispered into the darkness. "I promise you that. Whatever it takes, I will keep you safe." The forest did not answer, but the wind picked up, sending snow swirling around her feet like restless spirits. Lorena walked until the towers of Ironridge vanished behind the trees, until the lights from the keep windows became nothing more than distant stars, until the only sounds were her own breathing and the crunch of snow beneath her boots. Her feet began to ache. Her fingers went numb despite being tucked into the cloak. Her lips cracked in the cold air and each breath tasted like blood. She walked anyway. When the moon reached its highest point and her legs finally gave out, she found a massive oak tree whose roots had twisted above ground, creating a small hollow space beneath. It was barely large enough for her to curl into, but it blocked some of the wind. Lorena crawled inside and pulled the cloak over herself as best she could. The ground was frozen solid, leaching the heat from her body through the thin dress. She tucked her hands under her arms and tried to make herself as small as possible. The cold seeped in anyway, relentless and patient. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind would not quiet. It replayed the ceremony again and again, the black flame, Armani's cold expression, the way he had looked at her, as if she were a stranger. She tried to find the moment when everything had started to go wrong, the first crack in the foundation that had led to this collapse. 3 weeks ago, she had woken to find Armani sitting on the edge of their bed, staring at his hands in the pre-dawn light. When she had touched his shoulder, he had flinched. "Bad dream?" she had asked. "Something like that," he had said, but he would not look at her. That should have been her warning, but she had dismissed it, believing that whatever troubled him would pass, that their bond was strong enough to weather any storm. She had been wrong. 2 weeks ago, he had stopped coming to their chambers at night, claiming council business kept him late. When she went to find him, she discovered him in his study with Lord Gregory Conway, their heads bent together over documents she was not invited to see. When she asked what was wrong, Armani had said, "Nothing you need to concern yourself with," as if she were a child to be protected rather than his Luna and partner. 1 week ago, Briella Conway had begun appearing at court functions, standing just close enough to Armani to be noticed, but not close enough to be improper. She had smiled at Lorena with false warmth and offered congratulations on the pregnancy. "I do hope the child is healthy," Briella had said, her blue eyes as cold as winter ice beneath the warm words. Royal bloodlines can be so delicate. Lorena had felt the threat beneath the politeness, but had not understood it then. Now, sitting in a frozen hollow, with exile stretching out before her, she understood perfectly. She had been naive. She had believed that being chosen as Armani's mate, that being Luna, that carrying his children would be enough to protect her from the vipers at court. She had forgotten that wolves were predators, and predators always went for the weak. And she had been weak in the way that mattered most in Ironridge. Her bloodline was tainted by old accusations. Her family was dead and scattered. She had no powerful relatives to defend her, no army of supporters to rally to her cause. She had only had Armani's love, and that, she now knew, had never been enough. Lorena did not sleep that first night. She drifted in and out of consciousness, shivering violently as her body tried to generate warmth it did not have. Several times she thought she heard howling in the distance, not the organized calls of a pack, but the wild, lonely sounds of wolves who belonged to no one. Rogue wolves, outcasts and exiles like herself. She wondered if they would find her before morning. She wondered if that would be a mercy. When dawn finally came, pale and grey and offering no warmth, Lorena crawled out of the hollow. Her muscles screamed in protest. Her hands were so numb she could barely feel them. But she forced herself to stand, to take inventory of what she had. Half a water skin, a handful of coins that would be useless in the wilderness, a cloak that was little better than decoration, the clothes on her back, and 2 unborn children who depended on her to survive. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. She oriented herself using the position of the weak sun and started walking north, away from Ironridge, away from everything she had known. toward whatever lay ahead in the frozen wilderness. The forest grew denser as the day wore on. The trees pressed closer together, their branches creating a canopy that blocked most of the light. Snow covered everything in a blanket of white that would have been beautiful if Lorena had the luxury of appreciating beauty. She found a stream by following the sound of running water. The edges were frozen, but the center still flowed. She drank deeply, feeling the ice-cold water shock her system, and refilled the water skin. Then she forced herself to eat some snow for the moisture, even though it made her colder. She needed to find food. She needed to find real shelter. She needed warmth and safety and a place to rest. She had none of those things, and no clear path to getting them. By the time the sun reached its peak, Lorena's vision was starting to blur. She had not eaten in over a day. The cold was sapping her strength faster than she could replenish it. Her body was directing all its resources to keeping the pups alive, leaving nothing for her own survival. She stumbled over a root hidden beneath the snow and fell hard, catching herself on her hands. The impact drove the air from her lungs and sent pain lancing up her arms. She knelt there in the snow, breathing hard, and felt tears freeze on her cheeks. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up. You promised them you would keep them safe, so get up." She pushed herself to her feet, swaying, and continued walking. On the third night, Lorena collapsed. She had been walking through a particularly dense section of forest when her legs simply gave out. One moment she was upright, the next she was on her knees in the snow, unable to make her body obey her commands. Her vision grayed at the edges. Her heartbeat was too slow, too weak. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the pups stirring, distressed by her distress, and she wanted to comfort them, but could not find the strength. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. I tried so hard." She closed her eyes, feeling the cold wrap around her like a shroud. Then she heard the growl. Low and deep, it rumbled through the darkness. Not threatening exactly, but not friendly either. The sound of a predator assessing potential prey. Lorena forced her eyes open and saw the wolf standing 10 feet away. It was a she-wolf, large and grey, with one ear torn nearly in half from some old fight. Its amber eyes glowed in the darkness, fixed on Lorena with an intelligence that went beyond animal instinct. "Go ahead," Lorena said, her voice barely a whisper. "Finish it." The wolf tilted its head, studying her. Then it did something Lorena had not expected. It walked forward, slowly, cautiously, until it stood directly in front of her. And then it lowered its massive head and dropped something at Lorena's feet. A dead hare, still warm. Lorena stared at the offering, unable to process what was happening. Wild wolves did not share kills. Rogue wolves were even less likely to show mercy. And yet here was this scarred she-wolf, giving her food when she had nothing to offer in return. "Why?" Lorena asked. The wolf sat back on its haunches and watched her with those knowing eyes. And somehow, Lorena understood. "Because you are pack, even if you have no pack. Because you are mother, and mothers deserve protection. Because you are outcast, and outcasts recognize each other." Lorena reached out with trembling hands and picked up the hare. The wolf did not move, did not threaten. It simply watched as Lorena used the small knife from the provisions pack to skin the animal, as she ate the raw meat because she had no way to make fire, as she forced food into her body, even though her stomach revolted against it. When she was done, the wolf stood and walked a short distance away. It circled 3 times, then lay down, curling its body into a ball with its tail over its nose. A clear invitation. Lorena crawled over and pressed herself against the wolf's back, feeling warmth for the first time in days. The she-wolf did not pull away. It stayed perfectly still, lending its heat, keeping watch through the night. Lorena buried her face in the wolf's thick fur and cried. Not from despair now, but from gratitude, from the overwhelming relief of not being completely alone. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." The wolf's only response was to shift slightly, making more room for Lorena against its side. And for the first time since her exile began, Lorena slept. When she woke the next morning, 3 more wolves had joined them. A limping black wolf with silver at its muzzle, a young white wolf with ribs showing through its winter coat, another grey wolf, smaller than the first, with bright amber eyes. They lay in a rough circle around Lorena and the torn-eared she-wolf, forming a living barrier against the cold. Lorena sat up slowly, careful not to startle them. The wolves watched her, but made no move to leave or attack. They simply observed, waiting to see what she would do. "You're all rogues, aren't you?" Lorena said softly. "Cast out, like me." The torn-eared she-wolf stood and shook the snow from her coat. Then she walked over to Lorena and pressed her head against Lorena's shoulder, a gesture of pack affection that Lorena had not felt since her exile. Lorena wrapped her arms around the wolf's thick neck and held on. "I'll call you Thorn," she said, "because you've survived despite everything trying to break you." She looked at each of the other wolves in turn. "Ghost," she said to the white-muzzled elder. "Ember," to the young one who seemed to burn with barely contained energy. "Shadow," to the smaller grey who watched from the edges. The wolves did not respond with words, but somehow Lorena felt their acceptance. These were their names now, and she was part of their pack, strange as that pack might be. Over the following days, Thorn led Lorena to better shelter, a cave system carved into a hillside, hidden behind a frozen waterfall. The caves went deep, providing protection from wind and predators. The wolves brought her food when she was too weak to hunt for herself. They kept her warm through the freezing nights. They taught her, in their wordless way, how to survive in the wilderness. And slowly, impossibly, Lorena grew stronger. She learned to move quietly through the forest. She learned to find water beneath ice. She learned which plants could be eaten even in winter, and which would make her sick. She learned the language of the wolves, the subtle shifts in posture and ear position that communicated danger, curiosity, contentment. She was no longer the Luna of Iron Ridge. She was something new, something forged in exile and hardship. She was a mother preparing for her children's arrival. She was a survivor, building a life from nothing. And in the quiet moments when the wolves slept and the cave was still, she was a woman processing grief and betrayal, letting the anger and hurt flow through her without drowning in it. Armani had destroyed her world. The Conway family had orchestrated her downfall. Iron Ridge had cast her out to die. But she was not dead. And that, Lorena decided, as she felt the pups moving inside her, was going to be their first mistake. The discovery came 6 weeks into her exile, during one of the rare moments when Lorena felt strong enough to explore beyond the immediate area of the caves. A blizzard had forced her to seek shelter in what she thought was another cave system. But when she entered, pushing through drifts of snow that blocked the entrance, she realized this was no natural formation. It was a chapel. Old, abandoned, half buried in snow and ivy, but unmistakably a place of worship. The stone walls still stood, though the roof had partially collapsed. Broken pews lined what had once been the main aisle, and at the far end, beneath a shaft of pale light from a hole in the ceiling, stood an altar. Lorena walked forward slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. Dust and snow mingled on the floor. Bird nests filled the rafters. Time had worn away much of the detail, but she could still make out symbols carved into the stone. Moons and stars and wolves running beneath ancient trees. This had been a Finch chapel. Her chest tightened. She recognized the style, the symbols. She had seen drawings in books, had heard stories from her grandmother before the old woman died. The Finch family had built places of worship across the northern territories, places where moon seers conducted rituals and read prophecies. All of them had been destroyed when the family fell, or so she had thought. Lorena moved to the altar and ran her hand across the stone. Centuries of wear had smoothed the surface, but she could still feel grooves where text had been carved. She brushed away dust and snow, trying to read the worn letters. Something cracked beneath her hand. She looked down and saw that she had pressed on a stone that was slightly different from the others, newer, perhaps, or repaired after damage. When she pushed harder, it shifted inward with a grinding sound. A section of the floor in front of the altar slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Lorena's breath caught. She knelt beside the opening and peered inside. Leather-bound books, journals by the look of them, wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture. They had been preserved carefully, hidden by someone who wanted them to survive. Lorena reached down with trembling hands and lifted the first journal free. The leather was old, but still supple. She unwrapped the oilcloth and opened to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, flowing across the yellowed paper in ink that had faded to brown, but was still legible. Property of Leona Finch, Moon Seer of Iron Ridge, year of the Silver Star, 1847, Lorena's grandmother's grandmother. The last great seer of their family before the massacre. She had heard stories about Leona, how the woman had served King Aldrich the Just, how her visions had prevented wars and saved countless lives, how she had been beloved by the kingdom until the day everything changed, the day the Conway family accused her of treason. Lorena's hands shook as she turned the pages. Most of the early entries were mundane, records of visions, interpretations, advice given to the king. But as she read further, the tone changed. 7th month, year of the Silver Star. I have seen it again. The same vision, more clearly now. Baylor Conway stands beneath a black banner, speaking with wolves I do not recognize. Their teeth are red. Their eyes are hollow. He hands them maps, our maps, showing the mountain passes and the locations of our border defenses. I brought this vision to King Aldrich today. He grew grave and promised to investigate. But when I left his chambers, I saw Lord Baylor in the corridor. He was smiling. 10th month, year of the Silver Star. The king has confronted Baylor about my visions. Baylor denies everything. He says I am mistaken, that moon visions can be symbolic rather than literal. He suggests I am seeing his legitimate diplomatic efforts as something sinister. But I know what I saw. And I know that Baylor's grandson was seen 2 nights ago accepting a pouch of gold from a messenger wearing the crest of the Shadow Paw Pack, our enemies. 1st month, year of the Iron Frost. Everything has gone wrong. The king was attacked by Shadowpaw forces in a location that should have been secret. 20 wolves died in the ambush. The king barely escaped with his life. Baylor has blamed me. He says my family must have revealed the information. He has produced witnesses, wolves I have never seen before, who claim they saw my brother meeting with enemy agents. He has letters with our family seal, though I know we wrote no such letters. I understand now what is happening. Baylor has been planning this for months. He will frame us for his own crimes. He will destroy my family to hide what he has done. I tried to warn the king again today, but Bela has filled his ear with poison. Eldrick looks at me now with suspicion, where once there was trust. We are being hunted. I must hide these journals. I must preserve the truth, even if no one will believe it while I live. Lorena read faster, her heart pounding. The entries grew more desperate, as Leona described her family being arrested one by one, as witnesses came forward with false testimony, as the king himself turned against them. And then, the final entry. Written in blood on a page torn from the journal, the letters sharp and angry. To whoever finds this truth when I am gone, the Conway family has destroyed mine. They have murdered innocents and called it justice. They have built their power on our graves and our stolen lands. But I have seen what comes after. I have seen the thread of fate that leads from this ending to another beginning, when the last daughter of my line bears twins beneath a broken moon. The stolen throne shall remember its debt. Sun and moon, earth and sky. The children will choose whether the kingdom burns or heals. The Conway shadow will fall, or the light will die forever. This is my final vision. This is my blood oath. May the mother moon witness. Below the text was a symbol drawn in dried blood, a circle containing two crescents, one pointing up and one pointing down, with a star between them. Lorena sat back, the journal trembling in her hands, the last daughter of the line. Twins. A broken moon. She looked down at her belly, where two heartbeats pulsed strong and steady. She was the last daughter. She was carrying twins. And on the night of her exile, the moon had turned the color of bone and looked broken against the sky. The prophecy was about her. About her children. Lorena felt something shift inside her. Not the physical movement of the pups, but something deeper. A sense of purpose settling into place, like a key turning in a lock. This was not just about survival anymore. This was not just about protecting her children until they were born and then living quietly in exile. This was about destiny, about justice, about ensuring that what happened to her family, to Leona and all the other Finches who had been murdered for crimes they didn't commit, would not be forgotten. Her children were prophesied. They had a purpose that went beyond the cruelty of one king and the schemes of one ambitious family. And Lorena would make certain they lived long enough to fulfill it. She gathered all the journals carefully and wrapped them back in the oilcloth. She would read them all, learn everything Leona had known, understand the full scope of what the Conway family had done. And when the time came, when her children were born and the world tried to tell them they were nothing, she would show them these journals. She would teach them the truth. She would give them the weapons they needed to reclaim what had been stolen from their bloodline. Amane had condemned her children to the wilderness, but the wilderness, Lorena thought as she carried the journals back toward the caves where Thorn and the others waited, was exactly where prophecies came to life. The contractions started 3 months after Lorena's exile, on a night when the moon hung in the sky like a broken promise. She had felt the warning, signs for days, the way the pups had dropped lower, the pressure in her hips, the strange restless energy that made it impossible to stay still. Thorn had been agitated too, pacing around the cave entrance, whining low in her throat. The wolves knew. They always knew. Lorena had been trying to gather more firewood when the first real contraction hit. It started as a tightening across her belly, then intensified into pain that stole her breath and drove her to her knees. She gripped a tree trunk, gasping, feeling sweat break out across her skin despite the winter cold. When the contraction passed, she straightened slowly and looked at the sky. The moon was beginning to rise, its light filtering through the trees in pale shafts. It was time. She made her way back to the caves as quickly as she could, one hand pressed to her belly, the other using trees for support. Thorn appeared at her side immediately, pressing against her leg to help her walk. The other wolves materialized from the forest, forming an escort as they guided her to the deepest chamber of the cave system, where she had prepared a nest of furs and dried moss. Lorena lowered herself onto the makeshift bed, her breathing already labored. Another contraction came, stronger than the first, and she curled around it, making a sound between a gasp and a moan. No healer, no midwife, no warm room with boiled water and clean cloths. No mate to hold her hand and share the pain through their bond as tradition demanded. Just Lorena, the wolves, and the stone cave that would either witness a miracle or become a tomb. "I can do this," she said aloud, as much to convince herself as to announce her intention to the universe. "I have survived everything else. I can survive this." Thorn lay down beside her, offering warmth and silent support. The other wolves positioned themselves at the cave entrance, standing guard. They could not deliver the pups, could not ease the pain, but they could keep watch and make sure nothing threatened Lorena in her most vulnerable moment. Hours passed. Lorena lost track of time as the contractions came faster and stronger. She had read about childbirth in books, had heard stories from women in Iron Ridge, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of it. The pain was immense. It built and crested and broke over her like waves, each one stealing her breath and her ability to think. She gripped the furs beneath her, her nails tearing through the material. Sweat soaked her hair and her clothes. Her muscles screamed in protest. And through it all she was alone in a way she had never experienced before. When Armani had claimed her as his mate, she had felt their bond form, a living connection between their souls that let them share emotions, sensations, even pain. It was supposed to be strongest during childbirth, allowing the father to carry some of the mother's suffering. But their bond had been severed, or clouded, or whatever dark magic the Conway family had used to twist Armani's perception of her. Either way, he felt nothing now. He was somewhere in Iron Ridge, perhaps sleeping peacefully in warm chambers, perhaps celebrating with Briella Conway, perhaps not thinking of Lorena at all. And she was here, alone, bringing his children into a world that had already condemned them. The thought sent rage flooding through her veins, hot and fierce. She welcomed it. Rage was better than despair. Rage gave her strength. "You will not break me," she gasped between contractions. She did not know if she was speaking to Armani, to the Conway family, to fate itself. "You will not break them. We will survive. We will survive, and you will regret what you have done." Thorn whined and licked Lorena's face, her rough tongue gentle. Another contraction hit, the strongest yet, and Lorena screamed. The sound echoed through the caves, primal and raw. Outside, the other wolves threw back their heads and howled in response, a chorus of voices that seemed to say, "You are not alone. We bear witness. We stand with you." The moon reached its highest point. Through the cave entrance, Lorena could see its light, pale and cold and somehow expectant, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And then, finally, she felt the shift. The overwhelming pressure changed, became something more focused. Her body took over, instinct guiding her through what came next. She braced herself, one hand gripping Thorn's fur, the other pressed against the stone floor. She pushed, with everything she had, channeling all her pain and rage and desperate determination into this one act of creation. The world narrowed to this moment. This breath, this push. Then sudden relief, a weight leaving her body. Lorena gasped and looked down. There, between her legs, impossibly small and perfect, lay a pup. Her hands shook as she reached for the tiny body. The pup was not moving. Panic seized her. She cleared the birthing sac from the face with gentle fingers, cleaning the nose and mouth. Still nothing. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. Breathe. Please breathe." She rubbed the pup's chest, willing life into that tiny form. Thorn leaned close, her breath warm on Lorena's arm. The pup shuddered, then gasped, then let out a thin, wavering cry that was the most beautiful sound Lorena had ever heard. She pulled the pup to her chest, laughing and crying at once, feeling the fragile heartbeat against her skin. The pup was male, she realized, a boy with golden-brown fur that was still damp and matted. She looked closer, and her breath caught. There, on the pup's forehead, beneath the wet fur, was a mark. Faint at first, but growing clearer as she watched, a symbol that seemed to glow with inner light, a sun, radiant and golden, with 3 rays extending upward like crown points, the prophecy. Sun and moon. Before Lorena could process what this meant, another contraction seized her. The second pup. She had known she was carrying twins, had felt 2 distinct heartbeats, but experiencing it was different from knowing it. She laid the first pup carefully on the furs beside her, making sure he was warm, then braced herself again. This labor was shorter, as if her body now understood what was required. Within minutes, the second pup emerged. Another moment of terror as the pup lay still. Another frantic clearing of airways. Another gasped breath that brought relief, so intense, Lorena sobbed with it. This pup was smaller than the first, with silver-white fur that shimmered even in the dim light of the cave. Female. A girl with delicate features and tiny paws, and on her forehead, glowing softly, was a crescent moon. Silver and perfect, its points upward like a crown. Sun and moon, earth and sky. The prophecy was not symbolic. It was literal. Lorena held both pups against her chest, feeling their warmth, their tiny movements, their complete dependence on her. She had done it. Against all odds, in the worst possible circumstances, she had brought them into the world alive. "Clay," she whispered, looking at the sun-marked pup. "Your name is Clay. Strong and earth-born, like the ground that bears up under all weight." "Mabel," she said to the moon-marked pup. "You are Mabel. Bright and beloved, like the light that guides through darkness." The pup squirmed against her, seeking warmth and nourishment. Lorena helped them find position, guiding them through instincts that were part wolf, part human, all miracle. As they began to nurse, something impossible happened. The symbols on their foreheads flared brighter. Clay's sun mark blazed gold, washing the cave walls with warm light. Mabel's moon mark glowed silver, casting everything in soft luminescence. Outside, Lorena heard a sound like nothing she had ever experienced. Deep and resonant, it seemed to come from the earth itself. A harmonic ringing that grew louder and louder until it filled the entire forest. Thorn's ears perked up. She whined, then howled, a long, mournful sound that the other wolves joined. Their voices rose in chorus, responding to something Lorena could feel, but not fully understand. The ringing continued, beautiful and terrible and undeniable. It came in 3 distinct tones that wove together like a braid of sound. Miles away, in the throne room of Iron Ridge Keep, 3 ancient, crystalline pillars began to vibrate. The howling stones had awakened. Armani woke from a nightmare with blood in his mouth. He shot upright in the massive bed, gasping, his heart hammering against his ribs. The taste of copper flooded his tongue. He had bitten down hard enough to split his lip in whatever dream had seized him. But the dream was already fading, leaving only fragments. A cave. Firelight. A woman's face twisted in pain and determination. Lorena. Her name hit him like a physical blow, and with it came a cascade of emotions that had been muted for weeks. Longing. Grief. A sense of wrongness so profound it made his stomach clench. What had he done? The thought surfaced before he could suppress it, and for a moment the fog that had clouded his mind lifted. He remembered Lorena's face during the rejection ceremony, the way she had looked at him with betrayal and hurt before walking into exile. He remembered other things too. Her laugh, the way she had always brought him tea when he worked late, sweetened with honey exactly as he liked it, the way she hummed while tending the lunar garden, the way she had looked at him on their bonding day, eyes full of trust and love. What had he done? Then the sound reached him. It started as a vibration in his bones, then grew into a harmonious ringing that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The windows rattled in their frames. The furniture trembled. Even the stone walls seemed to resonate with the sound. Armani threw off the covers and stumbled from the bed, his wolf surging inside him with sudden desperation. The sensation was so intense it drove him to his knees. His wolf, which had been strangely quiet since Lorena's exile, was now howling inside his mind with primal urgency. Meta. Pups. Heirs. The words thundered through his consciousness, undeniable and absolute. Armani forced himself upright and ran from his chambers, not bothering with anything except the sleep pants he had worn to bed. His bare feet slapped against cold stone as he raced through the corridors of the keep. Other wolves were emerging from their rooms, their faces confused and frightened. Guards stood at their posts with hands on weapons, looking around for threats they could not identify. "The throne room!" someone shouted. "The sound is coming from the throne room!" Armani ran faster. He burst through the double doors of the throne room and skidded to a halt, staring at the impossible sight before him. The howling stones were singing. 3 crystalline pillars, each twice the height of a man, stood in an arc behind the throne. They had been installed by the first Alpha King of Ironridge over 2 centuries ago, carved from some mineral that existed nowhere else in the known world. They were called the Howling Stones, because they resonated when true-born royal heirs were born, heirs recognized not by blood alone, but by the land itself, by some ancient magic that predated kingdoms and councils. They had not made a sound in over a century. The last time had been when Armani's great-great-grandfather was born, and even that ringing had been faint, lasting only minutes. This was different. The stones blazed with inner light, gold and silver and white that pulsed in time with the harmonic ringing. The sound was so pure, so powerful, that it brought tears to Armani's eyes without his understanding why. "Impossible," breathed Lord Gregory Conway, who had appeared at Armani's side. The older man's face was pale, his usual composure cracked. The stones only respond to heirs of the direct line. Unless... He did not finish the sentence, but Armani understood what he meant to say. Unless the heirs had just been born, unless Lorena had been telling the truth, unless everything, the ceremony, the black flame, the witnesses, the accusations, had been a lie. The fog in Armani's mind didn't just lift, it shattered. He remembered now. The strange, bitter aftertaste of the wine Lord Gregory had been serving him for months, the way Harris Mills had avoided his eyes before the ceremony, the coincidence that all the evidence against Lorena had come from Conway sources, the way Briella had appeared so quickly at court after Lorena's exile, ready to step into the role of Luna as if she had been preparing for it. What did you do?" Armani turned on Gregory, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "What did you do to me?" Gregory stepped back, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "My king, I understand the stones have startled you, but surely there is a rational explanation. What did you do?" The words came out as a growl, Armani's wolf surging so close to the surface that his eyes flickered gold and his teeth lengthened. Around them, the gathered wolves shrank back. They had seen Armani angry before, but never like this. Never with the absolute fury of a mate, bond reasserting itself after being suppressed. Before Gregory could answer, Harris Mills pushed through the crowd. The old healer looked like he had aged a decade since the rejection ceremony. His face was gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "Shadow Veil?" Harris said, his voice cracking. "Lord, Gregory gave you Shadow Veil poison. It clouds perception, turns trust to doubt. I falsified the blood ritual. I put blackthorn oil in the sacred flame to make it burn black. I lied to you, to the entire kingdom, because Gregory threatened to destroy me if I did not." The throne room erupted in shocked voices. Wolves shouted questions and accusations. Several guards moved toward Gregory, hands on weapons. But Armani barely heard any of it. His entire focus was on the howling stones, on the undeniable proof that was still singing through the keep. His children had been born, his heirs, the pups Lorena had been carrying when he sent her into winter exile to die. Horror crashed over him in waves. What he had done, what he had believed, how close he had come to destroying everything that mattered. "Where is she?" Armani's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Where is Lorena?" Harris shook his head, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I don't know. She walked north, into the wilderness. That was 3 months ago. My king, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what we—" Armani did not wait to hear more. He shifted mid-stride, his body exploding into his wolf form, a massive black beast with gold along his spine. His claws scraped against the stone floor as he raced from the throne room, through the keep, out into the winter night. Behind him, the howling stones continued their song. A sound of joy and welcome and warning all at once. The true heirs of Ironridge had been born, and their father had just realized he might have condemned them to death. Armani ran through the forest with a desperation that burned in his lungs and clawed at his heart. His massive wolf form crashed through undergrowth and leaped over fallen logs, moving faster than he had ever moved before. His senses were on high alert, searching for any trace of Lorena's scent, any sign that she had passed this way. But 3 months had passed since her exile. Snow had fallen and melted and fallen again. Wind had scattered whatever traces she might have left. The forest held its secrets close, and Armani was just one desperate wolf among thousands of trees. He pushed himself harder, ignoring the burning in his muscles and the ache in his chest. His wolf howled inside his mind, a sound of grief and rage and determination that echoed through the darkness. Find her. Find mate. Find pups. Make it right. But how? The wilderness was vast and unforgiving. Lorena could be anywhere. She could be— He cut off the thought before it could fully form. She was alive. She had to be alive. The howling stones had sung, which meant the pups had been born healthy and strong, which meant Lorena had survived long enough to bring them into the world. But survived childbirth and surviving winter were two very different things. After an hour of frantic searching, Armani forced himself to stop. He was running blind, letting panic guide him instead of strategy. That would not help Lorena. That would not help his children. He shifted back to human form and stood naked in the snow, breathing hard, trying to think clearly through the chaos in his mind. He needed help. He needed trackers, supplies, wolves who knew the northern wilderness. He needed to search systematically, not just run in random directions hoping to stumble across them. Armani threw back his head and howled, a long, powerful call that carried through the forest. It was the Alpha's summons, a command that every wolf in Iron Ridge would hear and recognize. Come to me. Now. Then he shifted again and began running back toward the keep, this time with purpose instead of panic. By dawn, Armani had assembled a search party. 12 of his best trackers, including wolves who had served as scouts during the border wars. Harris Mills, bound in silver chains and looking like death itself. And despite Armani's explicit orders that she remain behind, Briella Conway. She appeared in the courtyard where the party was gathering, dressed in fine traveling leathers and a white fur cloak. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her blue eyes held nothing but concern. I heard what happened, she said, approaching Armani with careful deference. The howling stones, the revelation about my father's crimes. My king, I swear to you, I knew nothing of his plans. The Shadow Veil poison, the falsified ritual, I am as horrified as anyone. Armani studied her face, trying to see past the mask of innocence to whatever truth lay beneath. His instincts, no longer clouded by the poison, screamed that Briella was involved. But he had no proof. Harris's confession had implicated Gregory, not his daughter. You will stay here, Armani said flatly. This is not your concern. She was my friend, Briella insisted, and to Armani's ears it sounded almost genuine. Lorena and I were close before the accusations. I want to help find her. Please. Against his better judgment, Armani nodded. Part of him wanted to refuse, to order Briella locked in the dungeons alongside her father until the truth could be fully uncovered. But another part, the part that was frantically desperate to find Lorena and would accept any help offered, won out. Fine, he said, but you follow orders. One step out of line and I will have you dragged back in chains. Briella bowed her head. Of course, my king. The party set out within the hour. They moved north, following the route Lorena would have taken from the gates. The trackers spread out, searching for signs. Disturbed earth, broken branches, anything that might indicate someone had passed this way months ago. It was slow work. The forest had covered most traces, and what remained was often ambiguous. A broken twig might have been caused by a person or by a deer. A scuff mark in the bark might be recent or months old. But gradually, piece by piece, they found a trail. A strip of white cloth tied around a branch, the kind of material used for exile dresses, too high up to be natural placement. Someone had put it there deliberately, perhaps as a marker. A small fire pit, carefully covered with stones, in a sheltered hollow. The ashes were long cold, but the arrangement spoke of a methodical mind trying to leave no trace. A thread snagged on a blackthorn bush, so fine that most wolves would have missed it. Armani stood with it between his fingers for a long moment, remembering Lorena's clothes, the way she had looked in that white dress during the ceremony. She came this way, one of the trackers reported, but the trail goes cold after this point. Too much snow, too much time passed. Armani forced down his frustration. They were close. He could feel it. But close was not enough when every day that passed increased the danger Lorena and the pups faced. They continued north, moving through increasingly dense forest. The temperature dropped as they gained elevation. Ice formed on the trees, making them glitter like crystal in the weak sunlight. On the third day of searching, they found the abandoned chapel. It was half buried in snow and ivy, nearly invisible until one of the scouts stumbled upon it while investigating what he thought was a cave entrance. Armani pushed through the drifts blocking the doorway and entered the ancient space. The air inside was still and cold. Dust covered everything, but there were signs of recent disturbance. Footprints in the dust, fingerprints on the altar, the floor panel that had been moved aside, revealing the hidden compartment beneath. The journals were gone. Armani knelt beside the compartment, running his hands over the empty space. Someone had found this place. Someone had taken what was hidden here. Lorena. It had to be Lorena. "My king," one of the trackers called from the entrance. "There are wolf prints outside, a lot of them, and they do not look like pack wolves." Armani joined him at the entrance and studied the prints in the snow. The tracker was right. These were the prints of rogue wolves, different sizes, different gaits, but all moving together as if coordinated. And leading away from the chapel, heading deeper into the wilderness, was a set of smaller prints, human feet in worn boots. "She is alive," Armani breathed. "She found this place. She has wolves with her." Hope surged through him, so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. Lorena had survived, against all odds. Cast out in winter while pregnant, she had not only survived, but had somehow gained protection from rogue wolves. "We follow the trail," Armani commanded. "Now." They moved faster, now that they had a clear direction. The wolf prints were easier to track than Lorena's faint traces had been. They led through dense forest, over rocky terrain, alongside a frozen stream. And then, on the 5th day, they found her. The clearing appeared suddenly, opening up between the trees like a secret space the forest had been hiding. Ancient oak trees formed a natural circle, their branches heavy with ice that glittered in the afternoon light. And in the center of that circle stood Lorena. Armani's breath left him in a rush. She was thinner than he remembered, her face carved down to sharper angles by hardship and hunger. Her clothes were patched and worn, clearly cobbled together from whatever materials she had been able to find or make. Her hair, which had always been carefully tended in Iron Ridge, hung loose and tangled around her shoulders. But her eyes held a strength he had never seen before. This was not the woman who had knelt in chains 3 months ago. This was someone who had walked through fire and emerged as steel. She held 2 bundles wrapped in fur against her chest. From where Armani stood, he could hear the soft sounds of infant pups, tiny whimpers and squeaks that went straight to his heart. Surrounding Lorena in a protective circle were at least 20 wolves. Rogues, all of them, bearing the scars and thin frames of outcasts. They did not attack, but they did not back down either, their amber eyes fixed on the search party with unwavering focus. The largest of them, a grey she-wolf with 1 torn ear, stood directly at Lorena's side. She bared her teeth in warning, not aggressive yet, but ready to become so in an instant. Armani dismounted from his horse slowly, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. His heart hammered in his chest. After months of searching, after the horror of realizing what he had done, she was here. She was alive. Their children were alive. "Lorena," he said, and her name came out hoarse with emotion. She looked at him, across the 20 feet of snow that separated them, and her expression was unreadable. Not angry, not relieved, just assessing. As if he were a stranger, she was deciding whether to trust. "You may not come closer," she said quietly. Every wolf in the clearing growled in unison, a sound that made the search party's horses sidestep nervously and sent a clear message. One more step and there would be blood. Armani dropped to his knees in the snow. The action shocked everyone. An alpha king didn't kneel, ever. It was a sign of submission, of weakness, of surrender. Murmurs ran through the search party. Even the rogue wolves seemed surprised, their growling fading to uncertain silence. "Please," Armani said, his voice breaking. "Please let me see them." Lorena's jaw tightened, but she did not move. "You do not get to say, 'please,' as if it is a key you still own. You do not get to appear after 3 months and ask for anything." I know. The words were ash in his mouth. I know what I did. I know there are no words that can make it right. But Lorena, I was poisoned. Gregory used Shadow Veil to cloud my mind, to make me doubt. "How long?" she interrupted. "How long did you take the poison before you believed I was capable of betrayal?" Armani opened his mouth and found he had no answer that would not condemn him further. Because the truth was that the poison had worked because part of him had been ready to believe. Part of him had been so afraid of being hurt, so scarred by watching his father die from his mother's treachery, that when doubt was offered, he had accepted it. "I failed you," he said instead. "The poison gave me excuses, but the failure was mine. I looked at you, my mate, carrying my children, and the first time someone whispered doubt, I chose fear over trust." Lorena's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "You sentenced us to death, Armani. You said those words in front of the entire kingdom. Let the wilderness raise it. You looked at me and felt a nothing." "I felt everything," Armani choked out. "That was the problem. I felt too much, and I was afraid of being destroyed by it. So when the poison made the bond feel dangerous instead of safe, He stopped, shaking his head. "There is no excuse. There is no justification. I condemned the most important thing in my life because I was a coward." Behind him, Harris Mills stumbled forward, chains clanking. The old healer fell to his knees beside Armani, his weathered face streaked with tears. "Please, Luna Lorena," Harris begged. "Please let me confess. I falsified the blood ritual. I told the king the child was not his when I knew it was. Gregory blackmailed me with an old mistake, and I was too afraid to do the right thing. I helped destroy your life because I was a coward, and I have not slept peacefully since. Every night I see your face as you walked into exile, and I know I helped put you there." His voice broke completely. The poison clouded the king's mind, but I lied to his face. I used my position, my reputation, to make the lie believable. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Lorena looked at Harris for a long moment. Then she said, "Your apology does not feed my children. It does not give me back the 3 months I spent freezing and starving. It does not erase the fact that I gave birth in a cave with no one but wolves to stand witness." Harris bowed his head, accepting the condemnation as his due. Lorena turned her attention back to Armani. "You want to see them?" she asked. "You want to see what the wilderness raised?" She adjusted the furs, and Armani caught his first clear glimpse of the pups. His heart stopped. They were perfect, small and impossibly precious, with tiny faces that bore features of both him and Lorena. But what made him gasp, what made his wolf surge with such force he nearly shifted right there, were the marks on their foreheads. The first pup, a boy with golden-brown fur, bore a glowing sun symbol, radiant and golden, like a crown of light. The second pup, a girl with silver-white fur, bore a crescent moon, luminous and silver, like captured starlight. The marks were not tattoos or paint. They came from within, pulsing with gentle light that seemed to breathe with the pup's heartbeats. "Sun and moon," Armani whispered. "The prophecy." "Yes," Lorena said. "The prophecy your kingdom thought was ancient history. The prophecy the Conway family tried to prevent by destroying mine. These are Clay and Mabel, Your son and your daughter, the heirs whose birth made the howling stones sing for the first time in a century." She took a step forward, and every rogue wolf moved with her, a coordinated response that spoke of deep trust. "Do you understand what you did, Armani? You did not just exile me. You tried to prevent this. You nearly succeeded in erasing the last chance for justice my family will ever have." Armani wanted to deny it, to say he had not known. But that was another excuse. He should have known. He should have questioned. He should have trusted. "I was wrong," he said, the words completely inadequate, but the only truth he had. "I was wrong about everything, and I know I cannot undo it. I know I have broken something between us that may never heal. But please, Lorena, please let me try. Let me protect you now. Let me help you raise them." "Protect us?" Lorena's laugh was sharp and bitter. "The wilderness has protected us better than you ever did. These wolves have kept us alive. The forest has sheltered us. We survived without Iron Ridge. We survived without you." "I know." Armani's voice cracked. "And that makes it worse, that you had to do it alone. That I was not there when Clay was born, when Mabel took her first breath. I missed everything, because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." He looked up at her, not bothering to hide his tears. "I do not ask you to forgive me. I do not ask you to take me back. I ask only for the chance to spend the rest of my life proving I can become the mate and father I should have been from the beginning." Before Lorena could respond, a sound from behind the search party made every wolf's ears prick up. Briella Conway had dismounted from her horse. She was walking toward the clearing, one hand hidden beneath her white fur cloak. "Briella, stay back," Armani commanded. But Briella did not stop. Her face, which had been composed and sympathetic all journey, had transformed into something cold and desperate. "This was not supposed to happen," she said, her voice shaking. "The poison should have worked. You should have forgotten her. You should have chosen me." Armani stood slowly, his instincts screaming danger. "What are you?" Briella's hand emerged from beneath the cloak, holding a silver dagger. It was a ceremonial blade meant for royal executions, razor-sharp and deadly. She did not attack Armani. She lunged toward Lorena, toward the pups. Everything happened at once. Armani shifted, his massive wolf form exploding forward to intercept her. The rogue wolves snarled and surged as a pack. Lorena turned her body, shielding the pups with her own flesh. But before anyone could reach Briella, before her blade could strike, both pups opened their eyes. Clay's eyes blazed gold, bright as the sun. Mabel's eyes glowed silver, luminous as the moon, and their powers awakened. The ground beneath Briella's feet cracked, not a small fracture, a massive split that tore through the frozen earth with a sound like thunder. Tree roots erupted from the soil, thick as a man's arm, and moving with impossible speed. They wrapped around Briella's legs before she could even scream, yanking her down and pinning her to the ground. Stones rose from the earth around her, levitating for a moment before slamming together to form a cage. The bars were rough and uneven, but solid, unbreakable. Clay, the sun-marked pup who was only weeks old, had just commanded the earth itself. At the same moment, a beam of pure moonlight pierced through the forest canopy. It should have been impossible. The sun was high in the sky, no moon visible. But the light came anyway, silver and brilliant, forming a shimmering barrier around Lorena and the pups. When Briella's silver dagger touched that barrier, the metal began to glow red-hot. Within seconds it was melting, the blade dripping like water onto the snow, where it hissed and steamed. Mabel, the moon-marked pup, had created a shield that nothing could penetrate. The clearing fell into stunned silence. Briella hung suspended in the root cage, her perfect composure shattered into wild-eyed terror. She struggled against the roots, but they held firm, tightening whenever she moved. The search party stared, most of them backing away from the display of raw power. These were not normal wolf pups. These were not even normal royal heirs. These were something more. Armani shifted back to human form, not caring about his nakedness in the cold. He stood frozen, staring at his children, his newborn pups, who had just defended their mother with powers no one in living memory had possessed. The rogue wolves lowered themselves to the ground one by one, their amber eyes fixed on Clay and Mabel. It was not submission. It was reverence. Lorena held the pups closer, her eyes wide with shock. The silver barrier around her pulsed once, then faded as Mabel's eyes dimmed back to their normal ice blue. Clay's sunmark stopped blazing, returning to its gentle glow. Both pups made soft squeaking sounds, exhausted by whatever they had just done. "By the Moon Mother," Harris Mills whispered, his voice filled with awe and terror. "They are Blood Crown and Moon Crown, both of them. The prophecy," Armani found his voice. "Lorena, are you?" "We are fine," Lorena said, though her voice shook slightly. She looked down at the pups in her arms, then up at the root cage, holding Briella. "I did not know they could do this. They have never. This is the first time they have shown any power. Because I tried to kill them," Briella spat from her prison. Her fear had curdled into rage. "They are abominations, monsters. This is why my family worked so hard to prevent your bloodline from producing heirs. This power should not exist." Armani crossed the clearing slowly, giving the rogue wolves time to assess him and decide he was not a threat. They watched, but didn't attack. When he reached the root cage, he looked down at Briella with cold fury. "Your family did not work to prevent a bloodline," he said quietly. "Your family murdered innocent wolves to hide their own crimes. Gregory betrayed my father's father. He sold information to our enemies. He framed the Finch family for his treason." Briella laughed, a brittle sound. "And you believed it all? You drank the poison willingly. You condemned your own mate because deep down you wanted to believe the worst of her. My father just gave you permission to follow your fears." The words hit harder than any physical blow because they contained truth. Armani had been poisoned, yes, but the poison had worked because he had let it, because he had been too afraid to trust, too damaged by his own past to believe that love could be real and lasting. "You are right," he said, and saw surprise flicker across Briella's face. "I failed her long before your father gave me the poison. I failed her the first time I chose to doubt instead of trust. But I will not fail her again. Or them." He turned away from Briella and walked to where Lorena stood, still surrounded by the protective circle of wolves. The grey she-wolf with the torn ear, Thorn, Armani guessed, growled low in warning. Armani knelt again, this time not in supplication, but in respect. He was not asking Lorena to forgive him. He was acknowledging that she had every right not to. "I cannot undo what I did," he said, speaking to her and the wolves and the forest itself. "I cannot give you back the months you lost. I cannot erase the pain. But I can give you truth, and I can give you justice." He looked up at her. "Come back to Iron Ridge. Not as my Luna. Not unless you choose it. But bring our children back to the kingdom they were born to inherit. Let me stand trial for what I did to you. Let the entire realm see the truth of what the Conway family has done." "And if I choose not to?" Lorena asked. "Then I will accept it," Armani said. I will make sure you have everything you need to raise Clay and Mabel safely. I will clear your family's name whether you return or not. And I will spend the rest of my life knowing I had something perfect and I destroyed it with my own fear. Lorena studied his face for a long moment. Armani did not look away. He let her see everything, his grief, his shame, his desperate hope that she might give him a chance to do better. Finally, she nodded. We will come. Not for you. For them. She looked down at the pups. They deserve to grow up knowing the truth about their heritage. They deserve to see the Conway family answer for what they have done. Relief flooded through Armani, so powerful it made him light-headed. Thank you. Do not thank me, Lorena said sharply. You have not earned gratitude. You have earned the chance to try. That is all. I understand. Lorena turned to the rogue wolves. Thorn looked up at her with amber eyes that held question and concern. Will you come with us? Lorena asked. I know Iron Ridge has cast you out before. I know you have no reason to trust any kingdom. But you saved my life. You protected my children. If you will stand with me now, I promise you will have a place in whatever comes next. The wolves looked at each other, communicating in ways Armani could not fully read. Then Thorn stood and pressed her head against Lorena's hip, an acceptance. One by one, the other rogues stood as well. They would follow. Not because of Armani or Iron Ridge or any kingdom law, because Lorena had earned their loyalty in the wilderness, had proven herself worthy through survival and strength. Then we go together, Lorena said. She began walking toward the horses, the wolves flowing around her like an honor guard. Armani fell into step beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Behind them, Briella screamed from her root cage. You cannot leave me here. I will die. Armani, please! Armani did not even look back. The wolves of this forest will decide your fate. Perhaps they will show you more mercy than you showed Lorena. They left Briella in the clearing, her screams fading as the party moved away. Whether the roots would release her or hold her until exposure claimed her, Armani didn't know and didn't care. His entire focus was on the woman walking ahead of him, carrying 2 miracles wrapped in fur. The woman he had failed so completely. The woman he would spend the rest of his life trying to deserve. The journey back to Iron Ridge took 3 days. They moved slowly, accommodating Lorena's need to rest frequently, and the presence of the rogue wolves who were not used to traveling with horses. Armani watched Lorena constantly, drinking in every detail he had missed during her exile. The way she held the pups so carefully, supporting their tiny heads. The way she hummed softly to them when they fussed. The way she trusted the wolves completely, letting them curl around her at night for warmth. She was different from the woman he had known in Iron Ridge. Harder, more self-sufficient. She no longer looked to him for approval or comfort. She had learned to provide those things for herself. It should have made him sad, seeing how much she had changed. Instead, he found himself in awe. This was who Lorena Finch truly was, beneath the politeness and accommodation she had shown at court. This was the strength that had been there all along, waiting for circumstances that would force it to the surface. On the second night, while the camp slept, Armani kept watch near Lorena's tent. She emerged at one point to nurse the pups, settling on a log near the fire with Clay and Mabel cradled against her chest. You should sleep, she said without looking at him. I have missed too much already, Armani replied. I do not want to miss this. Lorena was quiet for a moment, focused on making sure Clay was latched properly. Then she said, What will happen when we reach Iron Ridge? Truth, Armani said. Public testimony from Harris. The historical records proving your family's innocence, Gregory's trial, and—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I will abdicate if you wish it. If you want to rule without me, I will step aside." Lorena looked up sharply. "You would give up your crown?" "I would give up anything," Armani said simply. "The crown, the kingdom, my life if it would undo what I did. But since I cannot undo it, I will give you whatever you need to feel safe. If that means ruling alone, then so be it." "That is not how royal succession works," Lorena pointed out. "I will make it work," Armani said. "Clay and Mabel are the true heirs. The Howling Stones have recognized them. If necessary, I will serve as regent until they come of age. But I will not force you to stand beside me as Luna, if you do not wish it." Lorena turned her attention back to the pups, but Armani saw something shift in her expression. Not forgiveness. That would take far longer, if it came at all. But perhaps the beginning of belief that he meant what he said. "I loved you," she said quietly. "Before everything fell apart, I loved you completely. I believed we would raise our children together. I believed our bond was strong enough to weather anything." "I loved you too," Armani said, his voice rough. "I still do. That is what made the betrayal so terrible. I loved you, and I still failed you." "Love is not enough," Lorena said. "I learned that in the wilderness. Love without trust is just beautiful wreckage. So if you want any chance of rebuilding what you destroyed, you will have to prove more than love." "I know," Armani said, "and I will, every day, for as long as it takes." Mabel finished nursing and made a tiny squeaking sound. Lorena shifted her carefully and offered the other side to Clay. The sun-marked pup latched on eagerly, his little paws kneading against her chest. "They are perfect," Armani breathed. "They are everything," Lorena corrected. "They are the only reason I survived. When I wanted to give up in the cold, I thought of them. When I did not think I could endure labor alone, I thought of them. They have been my purpose since the moment you rejected us." The words stung, but Armani accepted the pain. He deserved it. He deserved far worse. "May I—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "May I hold them? Just once? I understand if you say no, but I would like to. I need to." He could not finish the sentence. How did you explain the desperate need to hold your children when you had missed their entire entry into the world? Lorena studied him for a long moment. Then, with careful movements, she shifted Clay away from her breast and wrapped him securely in his furs. She stood and walked the few steps to where Armani sat, then held out the tiny bundle. "Support his head," she instructed. "He cannot hold it up on his own yet." Armani took Clay with trembling hands, hardly daring to breathe. The pup was so small, so impossibly fragile despite the power they had seen him wield. His sun-mark glowed faintly in the firelight, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "Hello, Clay," Armani whispered. "I am your father, and I am so sorry I was not there when you were born." Clay squirmed slightly, making small noises, his tiny face scrunching up. Then his eyes opened, golden and bright and focused directly on Armani's face. The bond snapped into place. It was not the mate bond, that connection between two adults who chose each other. This was the parent bond, ancient and primal, the recognition between father and child that transcended words or conscious thought. Armani gasped as emotions flooded through him. Clay's contentment at being fed and warm, his instinctive trust of the person holding him, his complete vulnerability and dependence, and underneath all of that, power, raw and untamed and vast, sleeping inside this tiny body like a dragon waiting to wake. "He is magnificent," Armani managed. They both are, Lorena said. She had picked up Mabel and was holding her against her shoulder, patting the pup's back gently. And they will change everything. The kingdom, the court, everything that has been broken for generations. Armani looked from Clay to Mabel to Lorena and understood that she was right. These pups were not just heirs. They were a reckoning, and he was going to make sure they grew up in a kingdom worthy of them. On the third day, the walls of Iron Ridge came into view. Word had spread ahead of their arrival. The search party had sent riders back with news. Luna Lorena was alive. She had given birth to twins. The heirs bore the marks of prophecy, and Briella Conway had attempted murder. The entire kingdom had gathered to witness their return. As the party approached the gates, Armani saw thousands of wolves lining the roads. Most were silent, their faces showing shock and shame and desperate hope. A few called out, shouting apologies to Lorena, begging for forgiveness. Lorena rode in the center of the group, Clay and Mabel strapped against her chest in a carrier one of the trackers had fashioned. The rogue wolves surrounded her on all sides, forming a protective barrier. She did not acknowledge the crowds. She looked straight ahead, her face expressionless, showing nothing of what she felt. Only Armani, watching her closely, saw the slight tremble in her hands, saw the way she held the pups just a little tighter. This was the place that had condemned her. These were the wolves who had watched her exile and done nothing. Returning must have taken every ounce of courage she possessed. The gates of Iron Ridge Keep stood open. Elder Harris Mills had been sent ahead to prepare the throne room for what was about to happen. The Conway family's arrest, the revelation of truth, the restoration of the Finch name, and Armani's public acknowledgement of his failures. They rode through the gates and into the courtyard where, 3 months ago, Lorena had been rejected and cast out. Now she returned, surrounded by wolves, carrying the future of the kingdom in her arms. The gathered crowd parted silently as Lorena dismounted. Thorn and the other rogues pressed close, growling low warnings at anyone who came too near. Lorena walked toward the keep's entrance with her head high and her steps steady. She looked like a queen. No, Armani corrected himself as he followed behind her. She looked like something more than a queen. She looked like a woman who had survived the impossible and come back stronger. The throne room doors opened before them. Inside, Lord Gregory Conway waited in chains, flanked by guards. The historical records had been laid out on tables for all to see. The sacred flame burned white and pure in its bowl, no longer corrupted by blackthorn oil, and the howling stones still sang, a soft, continuous harmony that filled the space with undeniable truth. The heirs had come home. Now it was time for justice. The throne room of Iron Ridge had never held so many wolves. Every noble family, every pack representative, every border guard and court official had been summoned. They packed the space shoulder to shoulder, craning to see what would unfold. At the center of it all stood Lorena Finch, no longer in exile clothes, but in a gown of deep blue embroidered with silver ash leaves, the symbol of her family, which had not been worn openly in Iron Ridge for 3 generations. The gown had been provided by servants who remembered her, who had whispered apologies while helping her dress that morning. She carried Clay and Mabel against her chest, their sun and moon marks visible and glowing faintly. The pups were awake and alert, their unusual eyes taking in the crowd with an awareness that seemed far beyond their few weeks of life. Behind Lorena stood the rogue wolves. Thorn held position at her right hand, while Ghost, Ember, Shadow, and a dozen others formed a semicircle of protection. No one had dared suggest the wolves wait outside. One look at Lorena's face had made it clear they were part of this, or there would be no trial at all. Armani stood to the side, not on the throne, but at its base. He had refused to take his seat until this matter was resolved. He wore the black ceremonial cloak, but no crown. That too waited, placed on a cushion before the howling stones, waiting to see who would claim the right to wear it. Lord Gregory Conway knelt in silver chains before the gathered assembly. Beside him, similarly bound, were 3 of his advisers, men who had helped orchestrate the conspiracy. Harris Mills knelt as well, though his chains were lighter. He had confessed and cooperated, which would be taken into account. The new priestess, a young wolf named Sarah Hobbs, who had been elevated after Harris's removal from the position, stood beside the sacred flame. She had been chosen because she was young enough to have no connection to the old corruption, yet trained enough to perform the necessary rituals. "We are gathered," Sarah announced, her voice clear and strong, "to witness truth, to see justice done, and to acknowledge the crimes that have stained this kingdom for 3 generations. She gestured to the historical records laid out on tables throughout the room. These documents were hidden in the Conway estate. They contain letters, military orders, and testimonies from the Red Winter War, evidence that proves beyond doubt that Lord Baylor Conway, grandfather of the accused, betrayed King Aldrich by selling intelligence to the Shadow Paw Pack. A ripple of shock and anger moved through the crowd. Most had believed the official story, that the Finch family had been the traitors. Sarah continued, "When Leona Finch, Moonseer of Ironridge, discovered this betrayal through her visions, Baylor Conway framed her family for his crimes. He produced false witnesses and forged documents. He orchestrated the massacre of the Finch bloodline to hide what he had done." She picked up a journal, Leona's journal, which Lorena had found in the abandoned chapel. "This is the testimony of Leona Finch, written in the days before her execution. It details everything, the visions she had, her attempts to warn the king, and Baylor's methodical destruction of her family." Sarah read several passages aloud, her voice steady despite the horror of what she described. The slaughter, the children fleeing into the wilderness, Leona's final prophecy written in her own blood. When she finished, the silence in the throne room was absolute. Then Gregory spoke, his voice hoarse but defiant. "Ancient journals can be forged. Prophecies can be fabricated. You have no proof." "We have your proof," Armani cut in. His voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. He gestured to one of the guards, who brought forward a small chest. "This was found in your personal chambers. Care to explain what is inside?" The guard opened the chest. Inside were vials of Shadow Veil poison, records of payments to false witnesses, and correspondence with Briella detailing their plans to eliminate Lorena and install Briella as Luna. Gregory's face went pale. Armani picked up one of the letters and read aloud, "The Finch woman must be removed before she produces heirs. The prophecy cannot be fulfilled if the bloodline ends with her. Use whatever means necessary." He looked at Gregory with cold fury. "You did not just poison me. You tried to commit genocide. You tried to end the Finch bloodline entirely to prevent the prophecy from coming true. Because the prophecy is dangerous," Gregory shouted, his composure finally breaking. "You saw what those pups did in the forest. That power should not exist. It threatens the natural order." "The natural order," Lorena said, speaking for the first time, "or your family's stolen power." Every eye turned to her. She stood perfectly still, her hands resting protectively on the pups, her voice calm despite the rage that must have been burning inside her. "You did not fear the prophecy," Lorena continued. "You feared justice. You feared that someday someone would discover what your family had done. So you poisoned kings, murdered seers, and tried to make sure no Finch would ever live long enough to bring the truth to light. She took a step forward, and the howling stone's harmony grew louder, as if responding to her words. But I am here. My children are here, and the truth you tried to bury for 3 generations has come back to destroy you. Gregory lunged toward her, chains clanking, face twisted with hate. Your family should have stayed dead. Your bloodline is cursed. Those monsters you birthed will doom us all. The rogue wolves surged forward with snarls, ready to tear Gregory apart. But before they could reach him, before the guards could intervene, Clay and Mabel responded. Not with violence, with something more profound. Their marks blazed, sun and moon shining so brightly that wolves had to shield their eyes. The light spread from the pups outward, washing over everyone in the throne room. And in that light, truth became visible. Wolves gasped and cried out as images filled their minds. Not invasive, not forced, but offered. A vision of what had truly happened during the Red Winter War. They saw Baylor Conway meeting with enemy alphas under a black banner. Saw him handing over maps and battle plans in exchange for gold and territory. Saw him laughing as he betrayed his own kingdom. They saw Leona Finch trying to warn. King Aldrich. Saw her family being arrested one by one. Saw innocent wolves executed while Baylor watched with satisfaction. They saw generations of Conway manipulation, poisoned meals, falsified records, witnesses paid to lie. A conspiracy so deep and vast it had shaped the entire kingdom for decades. And they saw Lorena's exile, saw Armani under the influence of Shadowvale, his perception twisted until he could not recognize his own mate. Saw Briella's calculated cruelty, saw Harris Mills choosing cowardice over truth. When the light faded, the throne room erupted in chaos. Wolves roared in outrage. Some wept openly. Others called for Gregory's immediate execution. A few nobles who had benefited from Conway influence tried to slip toward the exits, only to find guards blocking their way. Sarah Hobbs raised her hands for silence. It took several minutes before the crowd quieted enough for her to speak. "The evidence is irrefutable," she announced. "Lord Gregory Conway, you are found guilty of treason, murder, conspiracy, and attempted genocide. Your lands are forfeit. Your titles are stripped. You and your family name are cast out from Ironridge, never to return." "And the sentence?" someone in the crowd shouted. Sarah looked to Lorena. "That is not my decision to make. Luna Lorena, your family was the one wronged. What justice would you see done?" Every wolf in the room fell silent, waiting. Lorena looked at Gregory for a long moment. He stared back at her with hatred and fear warring on his face. "Death would be easy," Lorena said finally. "Death would let you escape the weight of what you have done. So no, you will live." Gregory's eyes widened in confusion and hope. Lorena continued, "You will be taken to the Old Moon Temple on the border. You will spend the rest of your days there, restoring the names you erased. You will carve every Finch name into the memorial stones. You will tend the graves. You will live with the faces and stories of those your family murdered until you know each of them by heart." Her voice hardened. "And every morning when you wake wishing for death, you will remember that mercy can be a heavier chain than silver." The pronouncement was met with murmurs of approval. It was elegant and terrible, forcing Gregory to spend his remaining years in service to the people he had tried to destroy. "As for the others," Lorena said, looking at the chained advisors, "they will be judged according to their complicity. Those who acted under orders but showed remorse may find mercy. Those who participated willingly will join Gregory in his exile. She turned to Harris Mills, who had been weeping silently throughout the proceedings. "Elder Harris, you falsified the ritual. You lied to your king. You helped send me into the wilderness to die." Harris bowed his head, accepting whatever judgment came. "But you also confessed," Lorena said. "You provided the evidence that brought us here. You chose truth, even though it destroyed you." She paused, considering. "You will be stripped of your position as elder. You will never serve in an official capacity again. But you will live, and you will teach. You will spend your remaining years making sure every young wolf in this kingdom knows what happens when cowardice is chosen over courage." Harris sobbed, whether from relief or grief Lorena could not tell. "Thank you, Luna," he managed. "I will teach them. I swear it." Sarah nodded and gestured to the guards. "Take the prisoners. The sentences will be carried out immediately." As Gregory was dragged from the throne room, he twisted back to shout one final threat. "The prophecy will destroy you. When those pups come of age, when their power grows beyond controlling, you will wish I had succeeded." No one answered him. His voice faded as he was pulled from the room, and the throne room doors closed behind him with finality. Silence settled once again. Sarah turned to Armani. "My king, you summoned this assembly to hear truth. The truth has been heard. What would you say to your people?" Armani stood slowly. He looked at the assembled wolves, nobles who had supported the conspiracy, guards who had enforced unjust orders, common wolves who had watched Lorena's exile and done nothing. And he looked at Lorena, standing with their children, surrounded by wolves who had shown her more loyalty than his entire kingdom. "I was poisoned," Armani said, his voice carrying through the room. "Lord Gregory used Shadow Veil to cloud my judgment and turn my instincts against my mate. But poison is not an excuse. It is an explanation, not a justification." He descended from the dais and walked until he stood before Lorena. Then, for the second time in a week, Alpha King Armani of Ironridge knelt. "I looked at the woman I loved and chose doubt over trust," he said. "I sentenced my pregnant mate to death in the wilderness because I was afraid. Afraid of being weak, afraid of being betrayed as my father was, afraid of loving completely and losing everything." His voice cracked. "The poison gave me permission to follow my fears, but the fears were mine. The failure was mine, and the consequences fell on the most innocent among us." He looked up at Lorena. "I cannot ask you to forgive me. I can only promise that I will spend every remaining day of my life proving that I can become the mate and father I should have been from the beginning." Armani reached up and removed his ceremonial cloak, laying it on the floor. "I do not deserve this kingdom. I do not deserve this throne. If there were any justice, I would be the one in chains. But Ironridge needs a leader, and Clay and Mabel are too young to rule." He turned to address the crowd. "So I offer a choice. Luna Lorena can rule alone as regent until our children come of age. Or if she permits it, I will serve beside her as Alpha. Not above her, but equal to her, subject to her judgment and wisdom." The throne room erupted in discussion. Some wolves clearly supported the idea of Lorena ruling alone. Others argued that the kingdom needed both Alpha and Luna. Several debates broke out between different factions. Sarah raised her hands for silence again. When the noise died down, she said, "This is not a decision to be made in haste or by acclamation. Luna Lorena, you are owed time to consider. The kingdom will wait on your choice." Lorena looked at Armani, still kneeling before her. She looked at the throne waiting empty behind him. She looked at the howling stones, still singing their continuous harmony of welcome for the heirs. Then she looked down at Clay and Mabel, whose marks glowed softly in the torchlight. "I will give my answer," Lorena said, "at the moonrise ceremony 3 days from now. Until then, Armani may serve as acting alpha, but all major decisions will require my approval, and the rogue wolves who saved my life will be granted full pack status and lands within Iron Ridge. Their loyalty and protection will not be forgotten." A cheer went up from the rogues still standing behind her. Several of the nobles looked uncomfortable, but no one dared protest. Sarah nodded. "Then it is settled. 3 days hence, at moonrise, we will gather for the Luna's official recognition and her decision regarding the throne. This assembly is concluded." The crowd began to disperse, wolves filing out in groups, their voices rising in heated discussions about all they had witnessed. Lorena turned to leave, the rogue wolves surrounding her, but Armani's voice stopped her. "Lorena." She paused but did not turn around. "Thank you," Armani said quietly, "for giving me any chance at all." Lorena looked back over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "I am not giving you a chance for your sake. I am giving Clay and Mabel the chance to know their father. Do not waste it." Then she walked from the throne room, leaving Armani kneeling on the cold stone floor, surrounded by the echoes of everything he had broken, and the faint, desperate hope that he might somehow help rebuild it. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Lorena had been given the Luna's quarters in the keep, rooms she had occupied before her exile, now cleaned and restored. Someone had filled them with fresh flowers and soft furs. Someone had stocked the shelves with her favorite teas, small gestures from servants who remembered her kindness and felt ashamed they had not defended her. She accepted these offerings with quiet grace, but she did not sleep easily in the keep. The stone walls that had once felt like home now felt like a cage. At night, Thorn and several of the other rogue wolves slept on the floor around her bed, and only then could Lorena rest. Clay and Mabel thrived. They were growing faster than normal pups, already showing signs of the power they would one day command. Clay could make pebbles vibrate when he was happy. Mabel's presence made candles burn brighter. Small manifestations, but unmistakable signs of what was coming. Armani kept his distance, as Lorena had requested, but she saw him constantly, watching from across the courtyard when she took the pups outside, standing guard at night though he never approached her door, leaving gifts he never acknowledged as coming from him. Books on child-rearing, soft blankets, toys carved from wood, a journal with blank pages and a note that said only, "In case you want to write your own prophecy." She did not thank him, but she kept the gifts. On the second day, Harris Mills came to see her. The former elder looked like he had aged a decade since the trial. His face was gaunt, his hands trembled, and his eyes were haunted. "Luna," he said, bowing low at her door. "May I speak with you?" Lorena considered refusing, but curiosity won out. "You may enter. But if you upset my children, you will leave." Harris nodded and entered carefully. Thorn watched him with narrowed amber eyes, but did not growl. "I came to apologize," Harris said, "properly. Not in a throne room before witnesses, but here, to you alone." "Your apology changes nothing," Lorena said. "I know." Harris wrung his hands. "I know I can never make this right. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to understand. I was afraid. Gregory knew about a mistake I made years ago, a remedy that went wrong, a pup who died because of my error. He threatened to expose me, to destroy everything I had built." He sat heavily on a chair, looking older than his years. So I helped him. I told myself it was for the good of the kingdom, that perhaps you truly were a threat, that maybe the prophecy was dangerous. I built a wall of lies around my cowardice until I almost believed it myself. Lorena listened in silence, Clay and Mabel sleeping peacefully in the cradle beside her. But when you walked into that exile, Harris continued, his voice breaking, I saw your face, and I knew I had just condemned an innocent woman and her unborn children to death because I was too afraid to lose my reputation. Tears streaked down his weathered face. I haven't slept peacefully since. I doubt I ever will again. But I wanted you to know. I will do what you commanded. I will teach the young wolves. I will make sure they understand that cowardice is not a small sin. That choosing silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit in that injustice. Lorena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Do you know what I learned in the wilderness, Harris? No, Luna. I learned that some mistakes can be atoned for, and some cannot. Yours falls in the second category. You helped send me to die. You falsified sacred rituals. You betrayed everything your position stood for. She paused. But I also learned that mercy is not about what people deserve. It is about what kind of person you choose to be when you have the power to destroy someone. Harris looked up, hope and fear mingling on his face. So I will not forgive you, Lorena said, but I will release you from the burden of asking for it. You will live with what you have done. You will teach as I commanded. And perhaps, if you do it well enough, the young wolves you save from making your mistakes will be forgiveness enough. Harris bowed his head. Thank you, Luna. I will not fail in this. See that you don't. After Harris left, Lorena sat by the window and watched the moon rise. Tomorrow night would be the ceremony. Tomorrow night she would have to decide what kind of future she wanted. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Enter, she called. Armani stepped inside, moving carefully, respectfully, as if entering a sacred space. He had bathed and dressed in simple clothes, no crown, no ceremonial finery, just a man hoping to be allowed near his family. I wanted to see them before tomorrow, he said. If you will permit it. Lorena gestured to the cradle. They are sleeping. You may look, but do not wake them. Armani crossed the room and looked down at Clay and Mabel. His expression transformed, all the hard edges of the Alpha King softening into something tender and amazed. They are so beautiful, he whispered. Every time I see them, I cannot believe they are real. They are very real, Lorena said, and they will need both of us if they are to survive what is coming. Armani looked up sharply. What do you mean? Lorena stood and joined him by the cradle. The prophecy, Armani. Gregory was not entirely wrong. Clay and Mabel have power that has not been seen in generations. As they grow, that power will grow, and power always attracts danger. She touched Mabel's tiny hand, and the pup's moon mark glowed faintly in her sleep. They will need to be protected, trained, taught how to use their gifts without being consumed by them. That is not a task one parent can handle alone. Are you saying? Armani hardly dared to hope. I am saying that tomorrow I will make a decision based not on what I want, but on what they need. Lorena looked at him directly. If I allow you to rule beside me, it will not be because I have forgiven you. It will be because our children deserve a father who is present and committed. Can you accept that? Yes, Armani said immediately. Yes, I will take whatever chance you give me, on whatever terms you set. Lorena nodded slowly. Then tomorrow you will have your answer, Armani reached out as if to touch her hand, then stopped himself. May I hold them? Just for a moment. Lorena hesitated, then carefully lifted Clay from the cradle. Support his head. He is stronger than he looks, but he is still fragile. She placed the sun-marked pup in Armani's arms, watching carefully to make sure he held Clay correctly. Armani looked down at his son with such naked love and grief that Lorena had to look away. This was the man she had fallen in love with, the one capable of tenderness beneath all the armor, the one she had believed would protect her always. I am sorry I was not there when you were born, Armani whispered to Clay. I am sorry for so many things, but I promise you, I will be here for everything that comes next. I will be the father you deserve. Clay stirred in his sleep, one tiny hand wrapping around Armani's finger. The sun mark pulsed once, as if acknowledging the bond between father and son. He trusts you, Lorena said softly. Even after everything, he trusts you instinctively. That is what gives me hope that this might work. Armani looked at her, his eyes wet. And do you trust me? No, Lorena said honestly. Not yet. Trust is earned through time and consistency, but I am willing to see if you can earn it back. That is more than I deserve. Yes, Lorena agreed. It is. They stood together in the quiet room, their children between them, and for the first time since the exile, something like peace settled over them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but the possibility of both, waiting in the future like a door left slightly open. The night of the moonrise ceremony arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Thousands had gathered on the sacred ground outside Iron Ridge's walls, wolves from every pack, every border territory, every corner of the kingdom. The ancient stone circle had been prepared for the ritual, with torches burning at each cardinal point and the ground cleared of snow to reveal the symbols carved into the rock centuries ago. At the center of the circle stood a new altar, carved from moon cedar and inscribed with both the Iron Ridge crest and the Finch family symbol, a merging of the two bloodlines that had been kept separate for too long. Lorena stood in the Luna's chambers, preparing for the ceremony. She wore a gown of midnight blue that seemed to capture starlight in its folds. Silver embroidery depicting ash trees and wolves wound up the sleeves and across the bodice. Her hair had been left loose, flowing down her back in dark waves. Around her throat hung a simple pendant, a silver crescent moon that had belonged to her grandmother, hidden away and recently returned by a servant who had kept it safe all these years. Thorn lay at her feet, having been bathed and groomed until her grey fur shone. The other rogue wolves waited outside, dressed in ceremonial collars that marked them as honored pack members rather than outcasts. You look like a queen, said Kimberly, one of the servants who had volunteered to help prepare Lorena. Like you were always meant to stand in that circle. Lorena looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone she barely recognized. The woman looking back was not the naive Luna who had been exiled. She was not the desperate mother who had given birth in a cave. She was something new, forged from both experiences, stronger for having survived them. I look like someone who refused to die, Lorena said. That is better than a queen. A knock at the door announced Armani's arrival. He entered cautiously, dressed in black ceremonial robes with the Iron Ridge, crest embroidered in silver. The iron crown sat on his head, but he carried a second crown in his hands, the Luna's circlet, the one that had been crushed during Lorena's exile and now had been carefully restored. The assembly is ready, he said. Are you? Lorena picked up Clay and Mabel from their cradle. Both pups were awake and alert, dressed in tiny ceremonial wraps that left their marked foreheads visible. They looked at their parents with eyes that held too much awareness for their age. "I am ready," Lorena said. They walked together through the keep and out into the winter night. The assembled wolves fell silent as they appeared, all eyes turning to watch the procession. Lorena carried the pups while Armani walked a half-step behind her, a symbolic gesture that would not be lost on anyone watching. The rogue wolves fell into formation around them, Thorn at the front and the others flanking their sides. They entered the stone circle, and the torches flared brighter. Priestess Sarah Hobbs stood at the altar, her young face serious and focused. Beside her were representatives from each major pack, witnesses who would attest to what happened here tonight. "We gather beneath the Mother Moon," Sarah announced, her voice carrying across the sacred ground, "to witness the recognition of Luna Lorena Finch, mate to Alpha King Armani, mother to the prophesied heirs Clay and Mabel." She gestured for Lorena to approach the altar. Lorena walked forward, her steps steady, despite the weight of so many eyes upon her. She gently placed Clay and Mabel in a specially prepared cradle on the altar, making sure they were warm and secure. Then she turned to face the assembly. Sarah lifted a silver bowl filled with moon water, water that had been left out under the full moon for 3 nights. She dipped her fingers into it and traced a symbol on Lorena's forehead, the crescent moon of the Luna. "Do you, Lorena Finch, accept the bond to Iron Ridge's throne?" Sarah asked. Lorena's voice was clear and strong. "I accept leadership. I accept responsibility to protect this kingdom and its people. I accept the duty to raise Clay and Mabel to understand both their power and their purpose." "And do you accept the mate bond with Alpha King Armani?" This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the moment that would determine the kingdom's future. Lorena looked at Armani, who stood just outside the circle, watching her with barely contained hope. "I accept a partnership," Lorena said slowly, choosing each word with care. "Not the bond we had before. That was broken beyond repair. But a new bond, built on honesty and action rather than pretty words and empty promises." She turned back to the assembly. "Armani was poisoned, that is true. But poison only worked because he chose to doubt me when he should have trusted. So if we are to rule together, it will be as equals. Not Alpha above Luna, but partners who check each other's judgments and share the burden of leadership." Murmurs ran through the crowd, some approving, some uncertain. "Furthermore," Lorena continued, "I will not rule from behind closed doors. The Luna's Council will be reformed. It will include representatives from the rogue wolves, from border packs, from families who have been excluded from power for generations. No more conspiracies, no more secrets that allow injustice to flourish." She lifted her chin. "And finally, I declare that the Finch family lands, seized 3 generations ago, will be restored. The moon temples will be rebuilt. The history of what was done to my bloodline will be taught to every young wolf so that such injustice is never repeated." The assembly erupted in discussion. Some wolves clearly supported these radical changes. Others looked uncomfortable with how much power Lorena was claiming. Sarah raised her hands for silence. "And does Alpha King Armani accept these terms?" All eyes turned to Armani. He stepped forward into the circle, moving until he stood before Lorena. Then, for the 3rd time in a week, he knelt. But this time was different. This time, he removed the iron crown from his head and held it out to Lorena. "I accept your terms, all of them. Not because I must, but because they are right. Because you have earned the power to make these demands, and I have earned nothing but the chance to prove I can do better." He looked up at her. "I do not ask to rule above you. I ask to stand beside you as your partner, to help protect our children, to help rebuild what my failures destroyed, on whatever terms you set, for as long as you allow it." Lorena looked at the crown in his outstretched hands. She looked at the assembly, thousands of wolves waiting to see what she would choose. She looked at Clay and Mabel, sleeping peacefully on the altar despite the noise and crowd. Then she took the crown from Armane's hands, but she did not place it on her own head. Instead, she held it aloft and said, "This kingdom does not need one ruler or two. It needs truth. It needs justice. It needs leaders who remember that power is a responsibility, not a right." She set the iron crown on the altar beside their children. "So we will rule together, Armane and I, as Alpha and Luna, as equals, as partners who challenge each other to be better than we are alone. And if either of us fails in this duty, the other has the power to check that failure." Sarah smiled, clearly pleased with this answer. She lifted the Luna's circlet and placed it on Lorena's head. The silver gleamed in the moonlight, restored from the broken pieces into something stronger than it had been before. "Then it is witnessed," Sarah pronounced. "Luna Lorena Finch Ironridge, mother of the prophesied heirs, partner to the Alpha King, leader of this realm." She turned to Armane, "And Alpha King Armane, father to the heirs, partner to the Luna, leader of this realm. Will you swear to uphold the terms she has set?" "I swear it," Armane said, his voice rough with emotion. "On my life and my honor, I swear to uphold these terms and earn the trust I have broken." Sarah nodded. "Then rise, and let the kingdom see its leaders." Armane stood, and Lorena took his hand, not in romance, but in partnership. They turned together to face the assembly, presenting themselves as a united front. The response was mixed. Some wolves howled in approval, their voices rising to the moon. Others were silent, clearly uncertain about this new arrangement. But no one protested openly. No one dared challenge the woman who had survived exile and returned with prophesied heirs. Clay and Mabel woke then, disturbed by the noise. Before anyone could react, they threw back their tiny heads and howled, high, clear sounds that should not have been possible from pups so young. Their marks blazed with light, sun and moon, gold and silver, burning so brightly that every wolf in the sacred circle had to shield their eyes. And in response, something miraculous happened. The howling stones in Iron Ridge's throne room, miles away, sang out in perfect harmony. The sound carried across the kingdom, a three-part chord that resonated in the bones of every wolf who heard it. But more than that, every moon temple in the kingdom, even those that had been abandoned for generations, began to glow with silver light. Stone altars that had been dark for decades suddenly blazed with sacred fire. Ancient symbols carved into rock became visible for the first time in living memory. The magic that had been dormant in Iron Ridge since the Finch family fell was awakening. The assembled wolves gasped and stared as the light from the temples created pillars reaching toward the sky. The kingdom itself seemed to be celebrating, recognizing what these young heirs represented. "The prophecy," someone whispered. "It is all true. Sun and moon," another voice added. "Earth and sky. They will choose whether we burn or heal." Lorena picked up Clay, while Armane lifted Mabel, and they held their children up toward the moon. The pups' marks pulsed in time with the singing, howling stones, creating a rhythm that felt ancient and new at once. "This kingdom has been broken," Lorena announced to the assembly. "It has been corrupted by lies and greed and fear. But tonight we begin the healing. Tonight we choose to build something better." She looked at Armane, and he nodded his agreement. Not for us, Armani added, but for them, for Clay and Mabel, and for all the young wolves who will inherit whatever world we leave behind. The howling began then, not ordered, not orchestrated, but spontaneous. One wolf threw back their head and voiced their hope, their grief, their determination. Then another joined, and another, until thousands of voices rose together in a chorus that echoed across the kingdom. The rogue wolves howled loudest of all, celebrating one of their own being recognized as Luna, celebrating the fact that outcasts could become honored, celebrating the proof that survival and strength could matter more than bloodline and tradition. Lorena closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. She thought of the night she had been exiled, walking into darkness with nothing but despair for company. She thought of the cave where she had given birth alone, certain she would die there. She thought of Thorn finding her with that first offering of food, of the prophecy hidden in a forgotten chapel, of Clay's first breath and Mabel's first cry, of every impossible thing that had happened to bring her to this moment. The wilderness had raised her children, just as Armani had commanded, but the wilderness had also raised her, had forged her into someone strong enough to return and demand justice, strong enough to redefine what a Luna could be, strong enough to stand beside an alpha, not as a subordinate, but as an equal. When the howling finally faded and silence returned to the sacred circle, Sarah performed the final ritual. She took moon water and touched it to Clay's forehead, then Mabel's, then Lorena's and Armani's in turn. By moon and sun, by earth and sky, by blood and bond, Sarah intoned, this family is recognized, these heirs are acknowledged, this partnership is witnessed. She smiled then, young and hopeful, despite the weight of what she had just overseen. May your rule bring healing. May your children know peace. May Ironridge remember that strength is not the absence of failure, but the courage to rise and do better after failing. The ceremony concluded, and slowly the assembly began to disperse. But many wolves lingered, wanting to catch a glimpse of the heirs, wanting to witness the new Luna and Alpha together. Armani and Lorena walked back toward the keep, side by side, their children in their arms, surrounded by rogue wolves who had become honored pack members. Behind them, the moon hung full and bright in the sky, blessing what they had built from ashes. What happens now? Armani asked quietly. Now, Lorena said, you prove yourself. Every day, through small actions and large decisions, through being present and consistent, through remembering that what we have now is fragile and new, not guaranteed or permanent. I understand, Armani said, and I will. Lorena looked at him, at the man who had broken her heart, and then spent weeks trying to carefully piece it back together. I hope you do, because if you fail them, she touched Clay and Mabel gently, I will not give you another chance. They deserve better than second-guessing their father's commitment. They will never have to question it, Armani promised. I swear it. Time would tell if that promise held. But as they entered the keep together, as the howling stones continued their soft harmony, as the kingdom settled into its first night under this new rule, Lorena allowed herself to hope. Not for what had been lost. That was gone, broken beyond repair. But for what might be built from the pieces, something stronger than what came before, forged in fire and exile and the impossible miracle of survival. She had been cast out to die. Instead, she had returned as something the kingdom had never seen before. A Luna who had earned her power through suffering rather than inheritance, who demanded partnership rather than submission, who brought with her the promise of prophecy fulfilled. And as she settled Clay and Mabel into their cradle that night, as she watched them sleep with their marks glowing softly in the darkness, Lorena understood what her great-grandmother Leona had meant. The children would choose whether the kingdom burned or healed, but that choice would be shaped by the world their parents built for them, by the example they set, by the courage they showed in rebuilding trust from ruins. The prophecy was not a destination, it was a beginning. And Lorena Finch, last daughter of a murdered bloodline, mother of miracles, Luna of Iron Ridge, was finally ready to see where that beginning would lead.